On a distant, cold planet, a young alien princess named Lyra was alone. Her planet, once full of life and beauty, had turned into a place of danger and fear. Lyra had been the heir to a powerful empire, a princess who would one day rule with wisdom and strength. But everything changed the day her family was overthrown. Her people, once loyal to her, turned against her. It all started when a group of powerful rebels attacked the royal palace. They had been planning for months, waiting for the right moment. The king and queen were captured and taken away, leaving Lyra alone. The rebels didn't just want the throne. They'd wanted power, and they would do anything to get it. They took control of the palace and forced Lyra to flee for her life. She barely escaped with her life, running into the vast wilderness of the planet. Her people, who once praised her and promised to protect her, now turned their backs on her. They saw her as a symbol of the old regime, and to them, she was a threat. She was left behind, abandoned by those who once cared for her. No one came to help. No one cared whether she lived or died. She was alone in a world that seemed determined to destroy her. The planet was harsh. It was covered with thick, dark forests, steep mountains, and wide, barren deserts. Strange, dangerous creatures roamed the land, and the weather was unpredictable. In the daytime, it was unbearably hot. At night, the temperature dropped so low that it felt like the air itself was trying to freeze her. Lyra tried to find shelter under the branches of alien trees, but they provided little protection from the cold. She was hungry, thirsty, and exhausted. Days turned into weeks, and every day was a fight for survival. She had no choice but to use her skills to stay alive. She knew how to hunt and gather food, but there was little to find. The planet seemed to reject her, just like the people who once loved her. She had once been a strong leader, admired by all, but now she felt weak. Her clothes were torn, her hair dirty and tangled. She had no more energy to keep going, but she refused to die. She couldn't give up. Her mind kept telling her to fight, to survive. She didn't know what she was fighting for anymore. Her people had betrayed her, and she was no longer a princess. But there was something inside her that refused to let go. She had to live. She had to find a way out of this hellish planet. In the distance, the sky turned dark. Lyra felt the chill of the night air creeping up her spine. She had to find shelter before the creatures came out to hunt. But the fear wasn't just from the wild animals. It was the fear of being alone. The fear that she might die here, forgotten, with no one to remember her. As she huddled beneath a rock ledge, Lyra closed her eyes, trying to sleep. She could feel her strength fading, but still, she held on. Little did she know, far away, help was coming. It was a help that she would never expect, but one that would change everything. Far from Lyra's lonely planet, a human exploration team was on a mission. Their goal was simple: to map unknown planets and collect information. The team was made up of brave humans who traveled through space to explore the unknown, but none of them knew that they were about to change the life of an alien princess. The team's ship, the Star Voyager, entered the atmosphere of the planet, its engines glowing bright as it slowly descended toward the surface. The crew members prepared for their mission. They had no idea the planet was home to anything more than rocks and wild animals. Their job was to check the planet's resources and report back to Earth. It was just another ordinary mission. One of the most important members of the team was Max. Max was not just any dog. He was a special kind of dog, trained to be part of the team on dangerous missions like this one. Max was a genetically enhanced canine, given the ability to sense danger and track living beings over long distances. His keen nose could pick up scents that the human crew couldn't even detect. He was a true hero in every sense, but his true skills were still unknown to him. The humans landed the ship near the edge of the planet's vast, rocky desert. The air was dry and hot, but Max was ready. He wore a special collar with tracking equipment, allowing the humans to communicate with him and track his location. The team gave him a simple command: find life. Max's job was to scout the area and search for any signs of life, plants, animals, or even people. Max's paws hit the ground as he jumped out of the ship, his nose immediately going to work. He sniffed the air, his sensitive nose picking up a faint scent in the distance. It was odd. There was something strange about this scent. It wasn't just any animal, and it didn't smell like the native creatures of the planet. Max's ears perked up, and he barked excitedly, letting the humans know he had found something. The humans quickly followed Max, setting off across the desert terrain. The planet's surface was rough, with jagged rocks and tall, spiky plants. The wind kicked up sand, but Max didn't stop. His instincts were sharp, and he was determined to find whatever it was that he had detected. The team was amazed by his speed and focus. They had never seen a dog like him. Hours passed, and Max led them deeper into the unknown. As the sun set, the sky turned dark. The temperature dropped quickly, but Max didn't stop his search. He led the humans through thick forests, across dry rivers, and up steep hills. His powerful nose kept him on track, and the humans followed closely behind. Then, just as the night grew cold, Max stopped in his tracks. The team caught up, and they saw what Max had found. There, barely visible in the distance, was a small figure barely standing. It was a creature, but not like any they had ever seen before. It was an alien, a princess, lying on the ground, weak and barely alive. The humans rushed forward, but Max stayed by the princess's side, his protective instincts kicking in. The princess was unconscious, her body bruised and battered from a harsh planet. The humans didn't know who she was, but they knew they had to help her. Max's sharp eyes never left the princess as the humans moved in. He had found her, and in that moment, he knew his mission was far more important than just a simple rescue. The team had no idea what they were getting into, but Max was ready for whatever came next. Max's nose was working overtime. The cool night air of the alien planet filled his lungs as he sniffed the ground, trying to find the faintest trace of life. The human team followed closely behind, watching Max closely, trusting his abilities. Max wasn't just any dog. He was a specially trained search and rescue canine, capable of tracking scents over long distances. But tonight, he wasn't just tracking animals. He was tracking a life that was more important than anyone could have known. The humans had just found the princess lying in the wilderness, barely alive. Now they had to get her back to the safety of the ship. But first, they needed to find her again. The princess had been lying in the dirt for so long that her scent was fading. The team knew that they had to hurry. Dangerous creatures roamed the area, and the princess was too weak to defend herself. If they didn't find her quickly, it could be too late. Max was on high alert. His eyes were scanning the ground, and his nose twitched as he picked up on a new scent. He had trained for this moment his entire life. The smell was faint, almost like a ghost, but it was definitely hers. He barked, signaling the humans to follow. Without wasting a second, he dashed ahead, his paws pounding the ground. The humans rushed to keep up. Through the rocky terrain they went, Max leading the way. The ground was rough, full of loose stones and sharp plants that could tear through clothing. But Max wasn't bothered by it. He was focused, his instincts guiding him through the dangerous landscape. The humans struggled to keep up, but they trusted him completely. They knew that Max was their best chance at finding the princess in time. The further they went, the more challenging the terrain became. The air grew colder and the wind howled through the hills. But Max didn't slow down. His nose stayed low to the ground, following the trail left by the princess. He knew that she was out there, waiting to be found. He couldn't stop, not when someone's life depended on him. Hours passed, and the team started to worry. The sun had set hours ago, and the planet's cold night air made it even harder to keep going. But Max's determination never wavered. He was a dog on a mission. He knew that no matter what happened, he had to find her. The teen was starting to lose hope when Max suddenly stopped. He sniffed the air and looked around, his ears alert. He had found something. Max barked loudly, signaling the humans to come closer. The team rushed over, hearts racing. They were tired, hungry, and worried. But Max had found something. His sharp eyes locked onto a small opening in the rocks, a cave-like space just ahead. The scent of the princess was stronger here. Max's tail wagged slightly, a sign of relief. The humans hesitated for a moment, unsure if it was safe to approach. But they knew they had no time to waste. With Max leading the way, they moved closer to the entrance. They could hear soft sounds, breathing, faint but steady. It was her. The princess was alive. Max barked again and ran into the small cave, his protective instincts kicking in. The humans followed, and there, in the darkness, they found her. The princess was lying against the cold rock, weak and exhausted but alive. Max gently approached her, keeping watch as the humans knelt beside her. The princess's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't alone. Max had found her. The moment Max entered the small cave, the air seemed to shift. It was dark inside, and the cold rock walls pressed in on all sides. The only sound was the soft breathing of the princess, who was still unconscious, lying against the stone. The humans followed Max into the cave, careful not to disturb the fragile quiet. They had found her. Max stopped by the princess's side, his large, bright eyes scanning her face. His tail was still as he watched her, protective as ever. The humans knelt down, gently checking for signs of life. The princess was pale, her body covered in dirt and scratches, but she was breathing. Her chest rose and fell slowly, but steady. One of the human crew members, a woman named Sarah, reached forward and touched the princess's shoulder. "She's alive," Sarah whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The relief in her voice was clear, "But she's weak. We need to get her back to the ship." Max barked softly, almost as if agreeing with Sarah. He stayed close to the princess, his body tense. He had done his job, but something about the princess made him stay. It was as though he could feel that she was important, that she needed his protection. Lyra's eyes fluttered open, her vision blurry at first. The last thing she remembered was the long, dark night in the wilderness. She had been so sure that she was alone, so certain that no one would find her. But now, something was different. There was a warmth near her, and she could hear soft voices speaking in a language she didn't recognize. Confused, she tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. The world around her spun, and she fell back against the cold stone. A strange, soft bark reached her ears, and she looked up to see a large dog standing by her side. It was no ordinary dog. It had an unusual collar, and its fur was a mix of colors she had never seen. The dog's eyes were kind but strong, as if it understood her. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "What are you?" she whispered, her voice cracked from dehydration. The human team exchanged glances. "That's Max," said Sarah softly, speaking to Lyra in a calm tone. "He's our rescue dog. He's the one who found you." Lyra blinked, still confused, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. A dog had found her. But this dog wasn't from her world. It was unlike anything she had seen before. Max took a step closer, his eyes softening as he looked down at her. He seemed to sense her fear, and instead of growling or backing away, he gently nudged her arm with his nose. Lyra hesitated but then reached out slowly, her hand shaking. She stroked Max's fur gently, surprised by how soft it was. She had never touched a dog before. She had never known creatures like this existed. As she touched him, she felt a small comfort. It was a small spark of hope in a world that had abandoned her. The princess looked up at Sarah and the other humans. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice weak but filled with curiosity. "We're humans," Sarah answered with a smile. "And we're here to help you." Lyra's eyes widened, and she glanced at Max again. "Humans, You came for me." Max barked softly, as if to say, "Yes, we did." For the first time in days, Lyra didn't feel completely alone. She had no idea who these humans were or why they had come for her. But in this moment, it didn't matter. She had been found. She was no longer abandoned. Lyra sat against the cold stone wall of the cave, wrapped in a blanket that one of the humans had given her. She could feel her body growing stronger, though it still ached from the long days of wandering. The humans had offered her food and water, and slowly the fog in her mind began to clear. But there was one thing she knew she had to do. She needed to tell them her story. Max sat beside her, his head resting on his paws. He had stayed close to her ever since she had woken up, and she appreciated his quiet comfort. He wasn't like the creatures from her planet. He wasn't dangerous. He was kind, and for some reason, she trusted him. Sarah, the woman who had spoken to her earlier, was sitting across from Lyra. She had a warm smile, but her eyes were full of curiosity and concern. The other humans had been busy setting up camp outside the cave, but Sarah stayed close, knowing that Lyra needed time. "Are you feeling better?" Sarah asked gently, her voice soft and kind. Lyra nodded, her fingers still trembling as she wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. She didn't know where to begin. The pain of losing everything was still fresh, and it hurt to think about the betrayal of her people. But she knew she had to share it. If these humans had come to her aid, she owed them the truth. "I was once the princess of my planet," Lyra began, her voice quiet, as if saying it out loud made it more real. "My family ruled for many generations. We had peace. We had prosperity." She paused, her eyes looking far away, as though she could still see the beautiful cities of her home planet in her mind. But then, everything changed. She could feel the tears begin to rise, but she forced them back. There were rebels. They wanted to take the throne. They didn't care about our people, only about power. They attacked my family, killed my parents. I barely escaped with my life. I ran, but they hunted me. My own people turned against me. They said I was the last symbol of the old rule. They didn't want me alive. Sarah's eyes softened with sympathy, but she said nothing. She let Lyra speak, knowing that sometimes the best thing was to listen. "I was alone," Lyra continued, her voice cracking slightly. "I didn't know who I could trust. I thought I would die in the wilderness, forgotten. I never thought anyone would come for me." Max lifted his head as Lyra spoke, his eyes meeting hers. She smiled faintly at him, touched by how much comfort the dog gave her. "And then you came," she whispered, looking at Sarah and the others. "You saved me." Sarah's heart went out to Lyra. "We couldn't just leave you behind," she said. "You're not alone anymore." Lyra nodded, her eyes bright with a mix of gratitude and sadness. "I don't know why you would help me. I'm nothing now, just a lost princess." "You're not nothing," Sarah replied firmly. "You're someone, and we're going to help you. Whatever happened to you, it's not the end of your story. You're not alone anymore." Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, letting Sarah's words sink in. For the first time since the attack, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe there was a future beyond the darkness of her past. The days following Lyra's rescue were a blur. She was still weak, her body struggling to recover from the harsh conditions of the planet. But with the humans, especially Max by her side, she felt a little more at ease. Slowly, she began to trust them, though everything about this new world was unfamiliar and strange. The human crew had taken her aboard their ship, the Star Voyager, a sleek craft that seemed like something out of a dream. Inside, it was warm and clean, a sharp contrast to the cold, wild planet. The crew had given her food and water, and she had eaten slowly, still cautious. She didn't know if she could trust their kindness yet, but every moment of care they showed her made her heart soften just a little more. Max stayed close, never leaving her side. His presence was comforting. His soft fur was warm when she rested her hand on it. He seemed to understand that she wasn't yet ready to open up fully, but he stayed, patient and protective. The crew had explained to her that Max was no ordinary dog. He was specially trained for missions like this. But to Lyra, Max was something more. He was her protector, her bridge to this strange new world. As the days passed, Lyra began to speak more with the humans. Sarah, the woman who had first spoken to her, was the one who spent the most time with her. Sarah didn't rush her to tell her story. Instead, she let Lyra ask questions, giving her time to understand the world around her. One evening, as the sun set outside the ship, Lyra found herself sitting beside Sarah in the ship's small common area. Max lay at her feet, his head resting on his paws. The soft hum of the ship filled the air, and Lyra took a deep breath. She still wasn't sure if she could trust these humans completely, but she was beginning to feel a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. "You know," Sarah said, breaking the silence, "we've been through a lot to find you, but I think we're starting to understand each other." Lyra looked at Sarah, her brow furrowing slightly. "Why? Why would you come all this way just to help me?" Sarah smiled gently. "We came because we believe in helping others. We believe that even in the darkest places, there's always a way to make things right. And Max, he knew you needed help. He's always been good at finding people in need." Lyra looked down at Max, who lifted his head and looked back at her with soft, trusting eyes. She had never felt that kind of bond with any creature before. She had been raised to be a leader, but she had never known kindness like this. It was almost hard to believe, but every day it felt more real. "I never thought anyone would come for me," Lyra admitted, her voice quiet. "We didn't leave you behind," Sarah replied softly. "No one should be left alone. Not like that." For the first time, Lyra felt a small tear slide down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, but Sarah noticed. She didn't say anything, just reached out and touched Lyra's arm gently. In that simple gesture, something shifted between them. Lyra realized that, despite all the pain she had been through, these humans, especially Max, had shown her a kindness she hadn't known existed. Lyra didn't know what the future held, but she knew she was no longer alone. She had found a new kind of family in the most unexpected way. And slowly, her trust in them grew, one small step at a time. Lyra's time aboard the Star Voyager was a mixture of healing and learning. She was slowly starting to trust the humans, and Max was always by her side, giving her a sense of comfort. The ship's crew treated her with kindness, and she felt like maybe, just maybe, she had a chance at a new life. But deep inside, she knew she couldn't relax completely. Her past was not far behind, and she wasn't sure how long the safety of the ship would last. Lyra had been running for days before the humans found her. She had escaped her home, a planet far from Earth, because her enemies were closing in. She was the last member of her royal family, and those who wanted her dead wouldn't stop until they had her. The humans didn't know the full story, but Lyra could feel them growing closer. The enemy was out there, and they were hunting her. One evening, as the ship drifted through space, a loud alarm suddenly blared. The crew rushed to their stations, their faces tense. Lyra stood up quickly, feeling her heart race. She had seen this before. Her enemies always came when least expected. "What's happening?" she asked, looking around at the crew. "They've found us," Sarah said, her voice filled with concern. "We're not alone. There's a ship on our tail." Lyra's eyes widened. "They're here." Max growled softly, standing up next to Lyra. He sensed her fear, and his protective instincts were on full alert. The crew scrambled to prepare, but Lyra knew there wasn't much time. They wouldn't stop until she was captured or destroyed. She rushed to the bridge, where the captain was watching the display. On the screen, a dark ship loomed, closing in fast. It was sleek and dangerous looking, designed for one thing: to capture or kill. "They're not here for us," the captain said, his voice grim. "They want her." Lyra's stomach turned. "They won't stop until they have me," she whispered. "I've been running from them for too long." Sarah came over and put a hand on her shoulder. "We're not going to let them take you. We'll fight." Lyra shook her head, trying to stay calm. "It's not that easy. They're better equipped. They won't hesitate. You need to leave." "No," Sarah said firmly. "We're not leaving without you. We'll protect you." Max barked. His ears perked, sensing danger outside the ship. The crew quickly went to work, preparing for a fight. Lyra felt a strange mix of fear and hope. She wasn't alone anymore. The humans had chosen to stand with her, even knowing the risk. But the reality of the situation hit hard. No one was safe when her enemies were involved. The enemy ship fired a warning shot, shaking the Star Voyager. The humans quickly countered, preparing to defend themselves. Lyra felt the pressure building. Time was running out. Her enemies were getting closer, and soon they would be face to face. As the enemy ship moved in, Lyra looked at Max. He stood next to her, eyes locked on the screen, ready to protect her. She knew that with him by her side, she wasn't alone. But could they survive the coming battle? The hunt was on, and the enemy would stop at nothing to capture her. The humans had already proven they would fight for her. Now she had to fight for them too. The enemy ship was closing in fast. The Star Voyager shook as another blast hit its shields. Lyra's heart raced, her mind clouded with fear. The time for running was over. The fight had begun. On the bridge, the crew worked frantically. The captain barked orders, trying to keep the ship in one piece while dodging the enemy's attacks. Lyra stood at the back, her hand on Max's fur. He was calm, his eyes focused on the screen, sensing the danger just as she did. Sarah stood beside her, eyes filled with determination. "You don't have to fight," Lyra said, her voice shaking. "I can leave, and they'll stop hunting you." Sarah shook her head. "We're in this together. You're not alone anymore." Lyra looked at the screen. The enemy ship was armed to the teeth, but the Star Voyager was smaller and faster. It wasn't a fair fight, but they had one advantage. They had each other. The humans had Max, and Max had them. Another blast shook the ship, sending sparks flying. The captain turned to the crew. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We can't take many more hits like that." Lyra swallowed hard. She had always fought alone, but now she was part of something bigger. The humans were ready to defend her, even if it meant risking their lives. Her enemies would not stop until she was captured, but these people, these strangers, had chosen to stand by her. They would not let her go down without a fight. Max growled low, his teeth showing, ready to protect his new family. Lyra placed her hand on his head, grateful for the dog who had led her to safety and had never once left her side. The enemy ship fired again, but this time, the Star Voyager moved quickly, avoiding the blast. The crew cheered, but they knew it wasn't over yet. The battle was just beginning. The captain looked at the tactical display and made a decision. "Let's end this." The crew worked together, preparing the ship's weapons for a final counterattack. The enemy ship fired again, but the Star Voyager was faster. With perfect timing, the crew launched their own strike. The enemy ship's shields flickered, then failed. Lyra could see the damage on the screen. The enemy ship was slowing down, its systems failing. The crew of the Star Voyager had done it. The ship was out of control, no longer a threat. But Lyra knew the danger wasn't over. There were more enemies out there, and they wouldn't give up easily. She turned to Sarah. "Thank you for everything." Sarah smiled, her face tired but determined. "We're just getting started." Max barked happily, sensing the victory, but Lyra knew that the fight was far from over. The final battle had been won, but the war was just beginning. She had made it this far, but now she had to face the future, knowing she wasn't alone anymore. The humans had proven they would fight for her, and for each other. She wasn't running anymore. The battle was over. The enemy ship had been destroyed, its remains scattered in the cold, endless void of space. The Star Voyager had been damaged, but the crew was safe. Lyra stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars through the ship's window. Her heart still raced from the fight, but it was different now. She was free. The humans had protected her, fought for her, and in the end, they had won. Max, who had been by her side throughout the entire ordeal, now lay calmly at her feet, his head resting on his paws. He was the same loyal dog she had come to trust, the one who had rescued her when she thought all hope was lost. Sarah walked over to Lyra, a tired but relieved smile on her face. "We did it," she said softly. "You're safe now." Lyra turned to face her, the weight of everything that had happened slowly sinking in. "I don't know how to thank you all," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You've given me a second chance at life." Sarah smiled warmly. "You don't have to thank us. We made a promise to protect you, and we kept it. You're one of us now." Lyra's heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. She had spent so much time running, hiding, always fearing the next attack. But now, for the first time in a long time, she felt something different: hope. These humans had fought for her without hesitation, and she knew they would always have her back. The crew of the Star Voyager had become her new family. They had accepted her without question, showing her kindness and loyalty she had never known. And Max, the brave dog who had found her in the wilderness, had become more than just a protector. He was her friend. Lyra looked out at the stars again, her eyes soft with a new sense of purpose. She had been lost, but now she had a place to belong. A new life was waiting for her, and it was one she was ready to embrace. For the first time, she realized she didn't have to face the world alone. She had the humans, she had Max, and she had her own strength. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: she would not face it in fear. The enemy was gone, and the past was behind her. Ahead lay new opportunities, new friendships, and a new life to build. Max got up from his spot, trotting over to Lyra. He nudged her hand with his nose, and she smiled, scratching behind his ears. He had always been there, through the good and the bad. And now, they were both free to move forward together. "We're ready for whatever comes next, Max," Lyra whispered, her voice full of confidence. The dog barked softly, as if agreeing with her. There was no more running. There was only the future, and they would face it together. With the humans by her side, and Max at her feet, Lyra knew she had finally found her place. A new life was just beginning.